They even hired a DJ. I remember standing there helping my mom arrange the cupcakes, sweating in the June heat, thinking, this is kind of overkill, right? But hey, it was Maddie's day. So I smiled and kept refilling the lemonade. Fast forward to this year, my turn to graduate. I didn't ask for much. I didn't even want a party, just a small dinner with the family to celebrate. I was the first person on my dad's side to finish college, and the first on my mom's side to do it without taking any student loans. I thought that might matter. Apparently, it didn't. The morning of my graduation, I got a quick, "We're proud of you" text from my parents. Maddie didn't even text, just like the Instagram photo I posted of me in my cap and gown. I walked across that stage, shook hands, smiled for the cameras, and looked out into the crowd. My best friend Jake and his parents had driven up for the ceremony. They waved and cheered. My own family? Nowhere in sight. At first, I made excuses for them. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe they had to park far away. Maybe something came up. But when I got back to my apartment and checked my phone, I saw a message from my mom. "We'll do a little dinner tonight at home. Nothing fancy, but hope you're hungry." I blinked at the screen. Nothing fancy? I'd graduated with honors. I'd pulled myself through 4 years of stress and exams and internships. Maddie got balloon arches and catered trays of chicken parmesan. I got a smiley face and a vague promise of dinner. Still, I didn't want to be dramatic. I told myself, it's not about the party. It's about being together. So I packed up my things and headed home. When I walked through the door, I knew. There was no smell of food, no laughter, no clinking glasses. Just Maddie scrolling on her phone on the couch, Dad watching golf in the living room, and Mom emerging from the kitchen holding a single pizza box. "Happy graduation," she said with an awkward smile, placing the box on the counter like it was some grand reveal. "We got your favorite, pepperoni." Maddie didn't even look up. "You're lucky," she said. Dad wanted to just pick up McDonald's. I looked around the room. No streamers. No card. No little sign on the fridge. Not even a soda to go with the pizza. My diploma was still rolled up in my bag, and I felt like it might as well have been a napkin. Mom must have seen something on my face, because she quickly grabbed a ketchup bottle from the fridge, squirted out the word "congrats" on a plate next to the pizza, and added a pathetic little heart at the end. "There. Now it's festive," she said brightly. I stood there, stunned, like I was watching someone else's life. I sat down, took a slice, and forced a smile. "Thanks," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Then I pulled out my phone, turned the camera on, and snapped a selfie with the slice and the ketchup plate in the background. I captioned it, "Dream Big, Kids," and posted it to my story. Nobody in the house noticed. They just kept watching TV. That was when I excused myself to take a walk. Instead, I got in my car, drove to the Marriott by the highway, and used the emergency credit card my grandparents gave me for real emergencies to book a room. I figured this qualified. I didn't even unpack. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cheap hotel painting above the desk, wondering how long I'd been fooling myself. How long I'd been telling myself that once I achieved something big enough, they'd see me. That this family, my family, would finally treat me like I mattered. That if I was good enough, smart enough, helpful enough, successful enough, they'd look at me the way they looked at Maddie. But they didn't. They never had. And maybe they never would. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "No, where are you?" Or, "Is everything okay? Just, are you coming home?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with something scathing. Another part of me just wanted to go to sleep and forget the whole day ever happened. But instead, I just left her on read. I lay back on the stiff hotel bed, phone in hand, and began scrolling through photos on my camera roll. There were so many pictures of me with Maddie, helping her move into her dorm, cheering her on at her dance recital, driving her to job interviews. But when I scrolled back to the photos of me, there were barely any. Most were selfies. No one ever really took pictures of me unless I asked. That thought sat heavy on my chest like a weight I hadn't noticed until now. The next morning, I turned off my phone. I didn't check my messages. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I just sat in that hotel room, eating bad continental breakfast and watching cable news on low volume, letting the silence wash over me. That's when something shifted. Not a breakdown, more like a quiet realization. I didn't want to go back. Not just to the house. To them. I was done playing second string in a family where I'd been the one holding the line for years. Done being the fallback, the afterthought, the kid who was only acknowledged when it was convenient. And that was the moment I started to plan what I'd do next. I stayed at the hotel for 2 more nights. I told myself it was just to get some space, but really, I think I needed to mourn. Not a person, but the version of my family I'd been pretending existed. The one I kept waiting for, hoping would show up someday. I spent those 2 days in silence, letting my phone buzz until the battery died, reading books I hadn't touched since freshman year, and eating whatever lukewarm food I could get delivered to the front desk. It was the most peace I'd felt in years. When I finally checked out, I didn't drive home. I didn't even tell them I was leaving the hotel. Instead, I drove to Jake's apartment, my best friend since middle school, and crashed on his couch. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a beer and said, "Took you long enough?" He always knew. He'd seen it firsthand. The way my family treated me like the spare tire of the family vehicle. Only useful in an emergency, and even then, kind of an inconvenience. "You're not gonna believe this," I told him as I scrolled through Maddie's social media. While I was ghosting the group chat, my parents and Maddie went to a vineyard the day after my graduation. Matching outfits, cheese boards, a banner that said Maddie's summer kickoff. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Your summer kickoff should have been your graduation weekend." "Exactly." She hijacked it. "No, they gave it to her." That's when I realized this wasn't new. Maddie had always had a way of bending moments to herself, and my parents never stopped her. When I got accepted into college, Maddie cried because I was leaving her behind. When I got a scholarship, Mom told me not to brag about money in front of her. When I made the dean's list, Dad said, "Well, it's not like you had a job while doing it like Maddie does." Jake didn't say much. He didn't have to. He just looked at me, shook his head, and said, "Man, that's messed up." That night, I sat up staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things I'd done for them. Paid half the electric bill while I was in school because Dad had some unexpected expenses. Covered Maddie's books for a semester when she forgot to register for her financial aid on time. Came home every break to help with yard work and babysit our younger cousins while Maddie went on road trips. I did it without resentment. At least, I thought I did. But now, it all felt like a long list of sacrifices they expected from me, not things they appreciated. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages flooded in. "Mom, we're worried. Are you okay?" "Dad, this is immature. We tried our best." "Maddie, seriously? It was just a pizza. You're being dramatic." Mom again. "Can you come home and talk like an adult?" Dad again. "We need to have a family conversation." That last one nearly made me laugh out loud. Now they wanted to talk? But what really got to me wasn't the tone of concern. It was the assumption that I'd come back. That I'd cool off, return home, and fall back into place. Like I always did. Like I always had. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started putting something else together. A resume. A new one. Then I started applying for jobs. Not just any jobs, but ones out of state. Far away. Seattle, Boston, Austin. I didn't care. I just knew that if I stayed in that town, I'd be pulled back in again. And I was done being their fallback. A few days later, Jake helped me move what little I owned out of the house. We waited until midday, when I knew they'd all be at work or out. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I just wanted my things. I found my room untouched, the pizza box still sitting in the kitchen trash like a mocking trophy. As I packed up books, clothes, and a few framed photos I actually liked, I noticed something strange. One of the kitchen drawers was locked. It was the one Mom always said held family documents. Curious, I found the tiny key taped under the junk drawer where she used to hide it when I was a kid. I opened it. Inside were a bunch of envelopes, bank statements, tax returns, and what looked like insurance papers. I flipped through without much interest until I saw something that made my stomach twist. A college fund statement with my name on it. One that had been closed 3 years ago. I scanned the page again. The account had thousands in it. More than enough to have paid for my final year. Closed by M. Dawson. Maddie. I kept reading. Turns out, the fund had been split. But not evenly. They'd transferred the remainder to a new account, one under Maddie's name. And guess what? It wasn't a college fund. It was a small business fund. My parents had helped her start her Etsy business selling beaded jewelry. With my college fund, I felt the blood drain from my face. All this time I thought we were scraping by. That I was being noble, paying for school myself, helping out when I could. Meanwhile, they were funneling my future into Maddie's bracelet hobby. That pizza party wasn't just an oversight. It was an exclamation point. I snapped photos of everything, stuffed the papers back where I found them, and locked the drawer again. By the time I left the house, I wasn't sad anymore. I was something else. Focused. Determined. Jake helped me load the last box into the car. "You good?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I will be." I moved into a short-term rental across town, just long enough to wrap things up. I had no intention of staying long. I needed to disappear in stages. First emotionally, then physically. I cut off their access to my bank account. I'd been listed as a secondary on some joint utilities for years. I pulled out my name from anything shared. Insurance, billing, subscriptions. Changed every password. Clean slate. But I wasn't done. I had one more move to make. One they'd never see coming. Not just revenge. Not just an exit. But something permanent. Maddie's birthday was always a production. Not just a party, an event. Growing up, her birthdays were basically local holidays in our house. One year, Mom rented out a trampoline park. Another, they flew her and her friends to Disneyland. And even as adults, nothing had changed. Last year, they surprised her with a weekend in Napa. All expenses paid. This year, she was turning 21, and I already knew what was coming. A blowout bash, booze, catered everything, and 100 people pretending she was the second coming of Audrey Hepburn. And I had no intention of showing up, at least, not in the way they expected. For the 2 weeks leading up to her birthday, I played it cool. No posts. No responses. My mom texted occasionally with things like, "Hope you're feeling better. We miss you." Maddie sent a single message. "Are you still being weird, or can I expect you at the party?" I didn't reply. I let them sit in their silence and pretend they still had access to me. Meanwhile, I got busy. I compiled every photo I took of the documents from the locked drawer, the college fund transfer, the account closures, the banking records showing how they moved the money under Maddie's name. I even dug up old emails from when I first asked Mom about help with tuition sophomore year. She told me then, "We just don't have the money, honey. You're gonna have to push through like your dad," and I did. Lies. But the real cherry on top came when I checked the Secretary of State's website and found out that the LLC Maddie was using to sell her custom jewelry was registered under Dad's name. Meaning, it was a family business. Meaning, they all knew what they did. This wasn't a Maddie thing. This was a them thing. The day before her party, I wrote an email. Short, professional, cold. I CC'd my parents, my aunt, and a few other relatives who always made excuses for them. I attached everything: photos, financials, screenshots. The subject line read, "Why I'm not coming to Maddie's birthday." The body of the email simply said, "For years, I thought the problem was me. That I wasn't doing enough, being enough, achieving enough. I see now that no matter how hard I worked, it was never about what I did. It was about who you chose to prioritize. You took the funds set aside for my future and gave it to Maddie. You told me to be grateful for a pizza while handing her my college savings on a silver platter. I've attached the proof. No one has to take my word for it. I won't be attending the party, or any future ones. Consider this my RSVP permanently declined." Then I hit send. Jake was the one who kept an eye on the fallout for me. I refused to check the group chat, but he did, and boy, did it implode. My mom called me 6 times in a row. Left voicemails that started calm and concerned and slowly spiraled into frantic and accusatory. "You took those documents out of context," she snapped in one. "That money wasn't just yours. We had to make a family decision." Maddie's response was even more on brand. She posted on her Instagram story a few hours before the party started. "Haters gonna hate. Some people can't stand to see others happy." She followed that up with a group photo of her in a white birthday dress, surrounded by friends and cousins. But something was off. The party looked half empty. A few people I knew, our cousins on Dad's side, had commented, "So sorry, won't make it after all," and got the email. "Wish you'd told us sooner." The next day, I got a text from Aunt Valerie. One sentence: "You didn't deserve that, Ryan. I'm so sorry." It was the first apology I'd received from anyone in the family since all of this began. But even with that small win, I still wasn't done. Because while the birthday drama was satisfying in its own right, it didn't close anything. It just cracked the surface. I needed distance, permanence, a clean break. So when I got the job offer from a company in Chicago, a good one, better pay than I dared to hope for, I accepted on the spot. I didn't tell my parents, didn't tell Maddie, didn't post about it. I just packed, quietly, deliberately, the way you do when you're not just moving houses, but leaving behind a version of yourself. 3 days before my move, Dad called. First time in weeks. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to hear it. Ryan, he said. His voice was stiff, formal, like we were strangers. Your mom and I. We read everything. You blindsided us. You stole from me. I replied. Calm. Measured. That wasn't a blindside. That was exposure. He exhaled sharply through his nose. You have no idea how hard it was to make that decision. Your sister needed help. So did I. There was a pause. A long, choking silence. Then he said, you don't have to leave. You could still be part of this family if you just. I hung up. That was the last conversation I had with either of my parents. The next morning, I loaded my car and hit the road. But right before I left town, I did one more thing. I stopped by the university office and asked if I could donate to the college fund program. I gave a small amount, nothing flashy, but I attached a note for the kid whose family chose someone else. This is so they don't have to be their own backup plan. And then I left. I arrived in Chicago with nothing but 3 suitcases, a used Honda, and a sense of finality that somehow made me feel weightless. I didn't cry when I crossed the state line. I didn't romanticize what I left behind. I just drove, letting the flat Midwest landscape pass me by like a long exhale. I'd spent my whole life shrinking myself to fit inside a family mold that never had space for me. Leaving wasn't running, it was releasing. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding my breath. The job was solid, mid-sized marketing firm, great culture, decent pay. More importantly, it gave me the clean slate I was desperate for. New coworkers, no awkward history. Nobody there knew me as Maddie's older brother or the quiet one. Just Ryan. Just the guy who showed up on time, worked hard, and had a sarcastic streak that made the intern laugh during staff meetings. I rented a tiny apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brownstone with creaky floors and peeling paint, but I loved it. Every night, I'd fall asleep hearing the rumble of the L train in the distance, a reminder that life was still moving, still buzzing, and I was finally a part of it, not an afterthought sitting quietly on the sidelines. For months, I didn't hear a word from my parents or Maddie. No calls. No texts. It was eerie, like they'd scrubbed me off the family whiteboard the way you'd wipe down a to-do list. And I was fine with that. At first. But then Thanksgiving rolled around, and even though I had no intention of going back, the silence hit harder than I expected. Jake invited me to spend it with his family, and I went. His mom hugged me like I just returned from war. His dad handed me a plate piled high before I even sat down. They made jokes, asked about my job, poured me a drink when I mentioned Chicago snow. They treated me like I belonged. That night, when everyone had gone to bed and Jake and I were playing video games in the basement like we were teenagers again, he turned to me and said, "You ever think they'll come around?" I didn't even pause. No, and that was the honest truth. Because people like them don't change. They pivot, they spin, they rewrite history, but they don't change. Still, there was a part of me, some small sliver, that wondered if they'd reach out during Christmas. They didn't. Instead, Maddie posted a